from denying that immigrants can share significant social identity with the settled population, Williams actually turns to the diversity of the South Walian experience as a real ground of hope. For Williams, no political structure can satisfactorily precede nor be decoupled from a particular cultural community. To embrace an idea of citizenship for him is not to move beyond the idea of culture. His argument seems to be ultimately that no usable concept of citizenship can be accessed independently from the life and culture of particular communities. So my discussion of Hannah Arendt and her notion that we need to have the right to have rights ended with the assertion that there is no usable concept of human nature that can be accessed independently from particular communities. Similarly, I ended my discussion of Raymond Williams by claiming that no usable concept of citizenship can be accessed independent from particular cultures and communities. I seem to have ended up in the same place, despite the fact that Arendt's focus is on the state and political structures, while Williams's focus is on culture. Their disagreement regarding the masses comes down to a difference in perspective, a difference that is also manifest in their discussions of the national question. Yet they both ultimately suggest that a tolerant globe is one of many citizens and citizenships, and that dreams of universalist global orders have tended to underpin totalitarian regimes. Moving into the last phase of the lecture, one of the reasons why they end up in the same place is because they actually start from the same place. The celebrated section on the rights to have rights and the origins of totalitarianism begins with a discussion of the Irish critic of the French Revolution, Edmund Burke. Burke is often seen as a foundational figure for conservative thought in Britain. Yet there's also another Burke, the Burke who criticised the modern colonial state, who campaigned against the British administration in India, who led an 8-year prosecution of one Warren Hastings, governor of Bengal and head of the East India Trading Company. A Burke who described the violence, both material and cultural, of colonialism inflicted upon subject peoples. It is the nature of tyranny, noted Burke, never to learn moderation from the ill success of first oppressions. On the contrary, all oppressors, all men thinking highly of the methods dictated by their nature, attribute the frustrations of the desires to the want of sufficient of rigour. Then they redouble the efforts of their impotent cruelty. Karl Marx derided Burke for being an out-and-out vulgar bourgeois. But when it comes to cultural tolerance, the Irishman born to a Catholic mother in a Protestant regime, haunted throughout his life by rumours of homosexuality, is a better model. While Marx derided the villagers of Hindustan, charging that they transformed a self-developing social state into never-changing natural destiny, and thus brought about a brutalizing worship of nature, exhibiting its degradation in the fact that man fell down on his knees in adoration of Hanuman the monkey and Sabala the cow. That's Marx. Burke, on the other hand, argued for the beauty and the integrity of Indian customs. Burke, the reactionary critic of Enlightenment universalism and the French Revolution, is also, as Henry Louis Gates notes, a father of cultural relativism and anti-colonialism. His emphasis on particular cultures and traditions, as opposed to the universalistic discourse of the rights of man, make him an important inspiration for Arendt, as quotation 15 suggests. These facts and reflections offer what seems an ironical, bitter, and belated confirmation of the famous arguments with which Edmund Burke opposed the French Revolution's Declaration of the Rights of Man. They appear to buttress his assertion that human rights were an abstraction, that it was much wiser to rely on an entailed inheritance of rights, which one transmits to one's children like life itself, and to claim one's rights to be the rights of an Englishman rather than the inalienable rights of man. According to Burke, the rights which we enjoy spring from within the nation, so that neither natural law nor divine command, nor any concept of mankind, such as Robespierre's human race, the sovereign of the earth, are needed as a source of law. The pragmatic soundness of Burke's concept seems to be beyond doubt in light of our manifold experiences. Not only did loss of national rights in all instances entail loss of human rights, the restoration of human rights, as the recent example of the State of Israel proves, has been achieved so far through the restoration of the establishment of national rights. And then, following the famous passages on the right to have rights, she says, Burke's arguments therefore gain an added significance if we look only at the general human condition of those who have been forced out of all political communities. Now, the juxtaposition of Israel and those forced out of political communities is clearly a tension there. Arendt's relationship with Zionism and the State of Israel would be a topic of another paper, one that I'm not qualified to give. But the emphasis here on the way in which national crucibles allow for people to have rights. Turning to Williams, Culture and Society, seen by many, his book of 1958, seen by many as the inaugural volume of British cultural studies, Culture and Society begins with Edmund Burke. For Williams, Burke begins the tradition of deploying culture as a means of critiquing industrial society. And Burke also sets in place a significant definition of national belonging. Burke prepared a position in the English mind, last quotation, from which the march of industrialism and liberalism was to be continually attacked. He established the idea of the state as the necessary agent of human perfection, and in terms of this idea, the aggressive individualism of the 19th century was bound to be condemned. He established further the idea of what has been called an organic society, where the emphasis is on the interrelation and continuity of human activities, rather than on separation into spheres of interest, each governed by its own laws. And then Raymond Williams quotes Burke, a nation is not an idea only of local extent and individual momentary aggregation, but it is an idea of continuity, which extends in time as well as in numbers and in space. And this is a choice not of one day or one set of people, not a tumultuary and giddy choice. It is a deliberate election of the ages and of generation. It is a constitution made by what is 10,000 times better than choice. It is made by the peculiar circumstances of occasions, tempers, dispositions, and moral, civil, and social habitudes of the people, which disclose themselves only in a long space of time. Immediately after Burke, says Williams, this complex which he describes was to be called the spirit of the nation. By the end of the 19th century, it was called a national culture. Examination of the influence and development of these ideas belongs to my later chapters. But in fact, these ideas, at least as they relate to the nation, which seems to be the subject of that paragraph, do not return in Williams's later chapters. Nor, for that matter, do they appear in The Long Revolution, the 1961 sequel to Culture and Society. Indeed, while the idea of nationhood is an explicit concern of Williams's novels that he was writing throughout his life, and the essays on Wales and Welshness that he began to write from the early 1970s, it's not actually until towards 2000 and 1983 that he engages with the national question and with national identity at any length. Welsh nationalism has, by that point in Williams's thought, the potential to play a radically deconstructive role in the UK, his dismissive term for the United Kingdom. But it would be a mistake to see his self-defined Welsh Europeanism as being based on replacing a bigger by a smaller nation-state in Europe. The challenge for minority nationalisms following the radical moment of revolution or independence is to think beyond national bonding. And Williams's analysis becomes considerably vaguer at this point, admitting that much remains to be done by way of detailed discussions and proposals. But his final vision is of a socialist future which, in Francis Mulhern's lucid synopsis, surpasses the very principle of all-purpose social boundaries. Societies, as the effective unities of collective life, would be variable in extent, with decision-making practices to match. We have to begin again with people, concludes Williams. Begin with people and build new political forms. And here again there are parallels with Arendt. Arendt came to feel that there was a factual and empirical basis for notions of human commonality because imperialism, war, technical progress had made every community dependent on others in a world system. Yet the form that that common humanity would take, paradoxically, was not a globally individualist universalism, but would be based on the universalizing claim that every individual is inseparable from his or her local particularity. It's the universal of the particular. Humanity must be developed within local communities as part of a shared value common to all local particular communities in order to guarantee the universal right to have rights. This model, as Mark Reith has noted, would seem to require some supranational, planetary, species-level guarantee, some sort of overlord, some kind of world government to ensure that all communities lived up to their ethical and moral responsibilities. It's a thoroughly utopian thought, or a disturbing one, depends how you approach it. But politically, stated Arendt, before drawing up the constitution of a new body politic, we shall have to create, not merely discover, a new foundation for human community as such. A sentence that echoes, I think, where Williams ended. Last paragraph. The establishment of what Raymond Williams termed self-governing societies, and Arendt described as human communities, may be one way for us in Wales to try and counterbalance the centralising force of a potential post-Brexit Britain with its inbuilt 85% English majority. The struggle for a variable socialism in Williams's terms for looser, more equitable and less centralised political structures in keeping with Arendt's thought may be, after Brexit, more necessary than ever. It would seem that the model of an independent Wales in a reformed Europe, defending particularism within a broader political confederation, naturalising immigrants as Welsh citizens, would, in terms of realisable possibilities, come closest to the future desired by Williams and Arendt. Unfortunately, that Welsh European vision, espoused in Raymond Williams's later writings, seems further away right now than at any time in my life. Welcome.